The sea on a winter night has a way of muting the world. Above the surface, a half-moon hangs pale in the sky, laying a thin trail of silver across the Pacific swells. Each crest rises and falls with a rhythm that feels eternal, indifferent to the war raging across continents. There is no sound but the wind over the water, and even that comes in whispers. To a sailor standing watch on the deck of a Japanese destroyer, the night might seem peaceful, almost deceptively so. But beneath that shimmering skin of the ocean, a predator is waiting. The submarine is USS Archerfish, a Balao-class boat of the United States Navy, 311 feet of welded steel painted in dull gray. Her conning tower is only a shadow against the moonlit sea when she surfaces. Her periscope and radar mast barely break the horizon when she slips under again. Inside her pressure hull, the air is close and heavy, tinged with oil, sweat, and machinery. Men move quietly around valves, gauges, and plotting tables. Their voices are hushed. Their concentration is absolute. They have been at war for years now, and yet tonight feels different. Something monumental is unfolding. At the center of it stands Commander Joseph Enright, 33 years old, dark-eyed, and carrying a reputation that until recently had been uncertain. He has tasted failure before. On an earlier command, he hesitated at crucial moments and returned from patrol without firing a single torpedo. To a submariner in wartime, that kind of patrol is more than disappointing. It is shameful. Enright even asked to be relieved, believing his instincts had failed him. He carried that scar into every decision he made afterward. Tonight, in these black waters south of Honshu, he intends to redeem himself. Enright stands at the periscope, one hand resting on the grip, the other brushing a rosary hidden in his pocket. He is Catholic, not outwardly pious, but he finds steadiness in that string of beads when responsibility becomes crushing. And tonight, responsibility is heavy. Somewhere to the north, beyond the headlands of Tokyo Bay, an enormous Japanese vessel is moving. The radar operator called it out first, just a blip at 12 miles, steady on a southwest course. The contact is large, unmistakably large. Enright knows in his bones this is no ordinary freighter. The only question is, what is it? Archerfish had been assigned lifeguard duty earlier that evening, waiting to rescue downed American airmen from raids that never launched. Now free to roam, she has stumbled onto a prize, though no one aboard yet understands the true magnitude of what they have found. Enright's mind flashes to the great Japanese capital ships, the behemoths that shook the Pacific. Musashi had been sunk at Leyte Gulf weeks earlier, hammered by waves of American bombs and torpedoes. Could Yamato herself be coming out? Or is this something stranger?
Something new. The submarine shudders slightly as she adjusts course. In the control room, men bend over the plotting board, tracing lines of relative motion, updating bearings with grease pencils. They work with quiet urgency, because in submarine warfare, timing and geometry mean life or death. A mistake won't just lose the target. It could invite destruction from the destroyers that certainly screen her. For now, Archerfish keeps her distance, shadowing on the surface, using darkness and thin cloud to hide her silhouette. Inside the submarine, life is tense but disciplined. The crew has long since learned to live in tight quarters. Torpedo men sleep beside their weapons in the forward room. Officers share bunks and shifts. Every man knows his station by instinct. The air carries a constant hum, fans, pumps, and the low murmur of diesels when surfaced. Men wear sweat-stained coveralls, some stripped to undershirts in the muggy compartments. On nights like this, nerves sharpen every sound. The creak of the hull as the sea presses in, the slap of waves against the bow, the faint buzz of the radar screen. Expectation can become hesitation. Enright will not let that happen again. He resolved that months earlier at Midway Naval Base, sitting across a poker table. A senior officer watched his aggressive bluffing and asked him, "Joe, would you command a submarine the way you play cards?" Enright answered simply, "Yes." That answer bought him another chance. Now, at the periscope, that chance is about to be tested. What Enright cannot know yet is the scale of what lies ahead. The ship he is stalking is Shinano, pride of Japanese shipyards. Fully loaded, she displaces more than 71,000 tons. She is the largest aircraft carrier in the world. Completed in secrecy, commissioned only days earlier, she is sailing with unfinished systems and a crew that has barely trained together. She is supposed to be a symbol of strength. Instead, she is steaming unknowingly toward a single submarine, commanded by a man who needs redemption as badly as the Japanese Navy needs a miracle. The moon slips behind thin clouds, darkening the horizon. For a moment, the ocean grows even quieter, almost as if it is holding its breath. Enright leans into the eyepiece again. The silhouette is faint, but there it is. He can see escorts, dark smudges cutting through the water around the main vessel. A destroyer turns sharply, racing toward Archerfish. For an instant, it seems the hunter has become the hunted.
Then, inexplicably, the destroyer shears off, wheels back, and resumes station alongside its charge. The chance remains. Enright whispers to his officers, calm but firm, "Stay with her. Let her zig. We'll find where she straightens out." His words are not just orders, they are a promise to himself, to his men, to his career. He will not hesitate. This time he will trust his instincts. This time he will strike. The clock moves toward midnight. Somewhere ahead, the largest carrier in history moves through the night, unaware that beneath the calm sea, a submarine and her determined captain have locked her in their sights. The stage is set. The game of patience, geometry, and fate has begun. The year is 1944, and the tide of the Second World War has turned with a force that is now undeniable. For Japan, the empire that once stretched from the frozen Aleutians to the jungles of Burma, the war is no longer about expansion, it is about survival. The empire is on the defensive, battered from the air, strangled at sea, and bleeding in its outer island fortresses. The Pacific is no longer a moat protecting the Japanese home islands. It has become a battlefield that shrinks with each passing month. American forces have leapt from island to island in a relentless advance, the Solomons, the Gilberts, the Marshalls, and then the Marianas. Each step brings U.S. forces closer to Japan's heart. With every landing, Japanese forces are pushed into weaker positions, stretched thin, with resources dwindling and morale sinking. By late 1944, the Philippines campaign is underway. General Douglas MacArthur has returned. Meanwhile, Admiral Chester Nimitz directs the great fleets of the U.S. Pacific Navy in a steady march toward the next objectives. And the oceans themselves have become hostile to Japanese shipping. Once the Imperial Navy dominated those waters, but now it is American submarines that rule beneath the waves. These boats, the Silent Service, have cut Japan's merchant fleet to ribbons. Tankers carrying oil from the East Indies are going down faster than they can be replaced. Cargo ships bringing food, weapons, and raw materials are easy prey for submarines armed with patience and torpedoes. By 1944, Japan has lost more than half its merchant fleet, and the shortage is becoming crippling. Factories slow, fuel runs short, basic supplies grow scarce. The mathematics of war has turned brutally against Japan. Where once the empire could replace losses in ships and aircraft, now each vessel sunk is irreplaceable. Shipyards struggle to patch damaged vessels, let alone build new ones. Steel is scarce,
Skilled workers have been drafted. American bombing raids are beginning to reach industrial centers. Above the waves, the situation is no better. The U.S. Navy has assembled the most powerful carrier strike groups ever seen. Fast carriers range freely across the Pacific, their aircraft pounding Japanese bases and striking the home islands themselves. The skies are no longer safe. B-29 superfortresses have begun bombing Japan's cities. Tokyo and Nagoya burn under firestorms, and more raids are coming. The Imperial Navy, once the most modern and feared force in the Pacific, is now a pale reflection of its former glory. Its air arm was crippled at Midway. Its surface fleet has been battered across years of grinding battles. And at Leyte Gulf, the largest naval battle in history, Japan threw nearly everything it had left into one last gamble. The result was disaster. Carriers like Zukaku, veteran of Pearl Harbor, were sunk. Musashi was destroyed under relentless waves of bombs and torpedoes. And though Yamato survived, she was damaged and forced to retreat. The human cost is equally devastating. Japan's experienced pilots, the men who executed the Pearl Harbor attack with such precision, are nearly all dead. Their replacements are hastily trained, some with fewer than 50 hours of flight time before being sent into combat. American pilots, by contrast, arrive with hundreds of hours of training. The result is slaughter in the skies. Japanese aircraft are being shot down at ratios of 10 to 1. Sometimes worse. Japan is running out of time, running out of ships, running out of options. Yet, even in this desperate situation, Japan clings to one last hope. A powerful new weapon might shift the balance, if only for a time. That weapon is not another battleship.
It is not a new fighter design. It is a ship unlike any the world has seen. A carrier so massive, so heavily armored, and so secret that the Allies have no confirmation it even exists. Her name is Shinano. Born from the hull of a Yamato-class battleship, she is meant to be untouchable, a fortress at sea. Japanese planners believe that if Shinano can be completed and put into action, she might anchor their defensive line around the home islands. Perhaps she can carry enough aircraft and special attack weapons to blunt the American advance. Perhaps she can threaten the invasion fleets that are surely coming. The strategic thinking behind Shinano reflects Japan's evolving doctrine. No longer can the Imperial Navy dream of decisive battles won by superior training and equipment. Instead, Japan needs a ship that can survive American air attacks, serve as a floating base for aircraft repair, and carry the new suicide weapons that are becoming central to Japanese strategy. Oka rocket-powered aircraft, Shinyo explosive motorboats. Weapons born of a grim calculation trade Japanese lives for American ships. But even as Japan builds her, reality presses in. Shipyard workers toil in shifts that stretch 16 hours. Materials are scarce, quality slips, deadlines loom. Shinano's completion is rushed, so rushed that vital safety tests are skipped. The Empire needs the ship. It needs her now. The seas around Japan are no longer friendly. American submarines hunt the coasts relentlessly. Wolf packs coordinate attacks on convoys, sinking escorts and merchantmen alike. In late November, as Shinano prepares to leave her shipyard, submarines lurk in the approaches to Tokyo Bay. The waters are divided into patrol zones, each boat responsible for a sector, all ready to report contacts and coordinate interceptions. Most will never know Shinano exists, but one will. And that single encounter will decide her fate. By November 1944, Japan is an empire under siege.
Its seas are patrolled by unseen predators. Its skies burn, its cities tremble under the certainty of invasion. Into that storm sails Shinano, a colossal ship, unready, untested, and carrying the burden of a nation's last hopes. And waiting for her, unseen in the night, is a submarine commanded by a man seeking redemption. Every great warship begins as lines on paper, blueprints that promise steel, power, and prestige. Shinano began that way, but her destiny changed more than once before she ever touched salt water. She was conceived in 1940 at the height of Japanese naval ambition as the third Yamato-class battleship. The Yamato class would be the largest, heaviest, most heavily armed battleships ever built. Their armor was thicker, their guns were larger, their displacement was greater. They were symbols of an empire that sought dominance of the seas. The Yamato class represented a philosophy of naval warfare that dated back decades. Japanese strategists, aware they could never match American industrial capacity, believed in qualitative superiority. If Japan could not build more ships than America, it would build better ships. Each Yamato-class battleship, they believed, would be worth 2 or 3 enemy battleships. Their 18.1-inch guns could strike at ranges where the enemy could not respond. Their armor could shrug off shells that would destroy lesser ships. 2 sisters were completed to that original design, Yamato and Musashi. Shinano's keel was laid down at Yokosuka Naval Arsenal with every expectation she would join them as a floating fortress. Construction began with ceremony and pride. Shinto priests blessed the ground. The emperor was informed. The finest steel was allocated. The most experienced shipbuilders were assigned. In the original plans, Shinano would displace over 70,000 tons, mount the same massive guns as her sisters, and cruise at high speed despite her enormous bulk. She represented not just a weapon, but a statement of Japanese technical power. But wars reshape dreams. In June 1942, Japan suffered a devastating loss at the Battle of Midway. 4 fleet carriers, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu, were lost in a single day. Along with them went the backbone of Japan's naval air arm. Midway shifted the balance of power in the Pacific permanently. The loss forced a reassessment of naval strategy. Aircraft carriers, not battleships, were proving decisive. The age of the big gun was ending. The age of aircraft had arrived. Japanese planners looked at Shinano's massive hull, still incomplete in her dock, and faced a choice. To finish her as a battleship meant producing another gun platform in a world where carriers determined victory. To leave her unfinished was unthinkable. Too much had been invested. The answer became clear. Shinano would be converted into an aircraft carrier. Not just any carrier, the largest carrier the world had ever seen. The conversion was radical. The lower hull, shaped for battleship demands, had to be adapted for entirely different purposes. Armor meant to survive shell fire had to support hangar decks and aviation fuel systems. Where gun turrets would have stood, aircraft elevators were installed. The superstructure was redesigned and shifted to starboard. A flight deck, more than 800 feet long, was built above it all. Unlike other carriers, Shinano was not designed primarily to launch vast offensive strikes. She was envisioned as a support carrier, a mobile fortress that could repair aircraft, replenish other carriers' air groups, and carry special attack weapons. Her hangar could accommodate dozens of aircraft, with additional planes stored in crates to be assembled later. She was meant to function as a floating reserve. This concept reflected Japan's changing strategy. By 1944, Japan could no longer amass hundreds of trained pilots for conventional carrier battles. The aviators who had struck Pearl Harbor were mostly dead. Their replacements were inadequately trained. So Japan sought weapons of shock and desperation. Shinano would become their arsenal. The secrecy surrounding her construction was unprecedented. Along with them went the backbone of Japan's naval air arm. Midway shifted the balance of power in the Pacific permanently. The loss forced a reassessment of naval strategy. Aircraft carriers, not battleships, were proving decisive. The age of the big gun was ending. The age of aircraft had arrived. Japanese planners looked at Shinano's massive hull, still incomplete in her dock, and faced a choice. To finish her as a battleship meant producing another gun platform in a world where carriers determined victory. To leave her unfinished was unthinkable. Too much had been invested. The answer became clear. Shinano would be converted into an aircraft carrier. Not just any carrier, the largest carrier the world had ever seen. The conversion was radical. The lower hull, shaped for battleship demands, had to be adapted for entirely different purposes. Armor meant to survive shell fire had to support hangar decks and aviation fuel systems. Where gun turrets would have stood, aircraft elevators were installed. The superstructure was redesigned and shifted to starboard. A flight deck more than 800 feet long was built above it all. Unlike other carriers, Shinano was not designed primarily to launch vast offensive strikes. She was envisioned as a support carrier, a mobile fortress that could repair aircraft, replenish other carriers' air groups, and carry special attack weapons. Her hangar could accommodate dozens of aircraft, with additional planes stored in crates to be assembled later. She was meant to function as a floating reserve. This concept reflected Japan's changing strategy. By 1944, Japan could no longer amass hundreds of trained pilots for conventional carrier battles. The aviators who had struck Pearl Harbor were mostly dead. Their replacements were inadequately trained. So Japan sought weapons of shock and desperation. Shinano would become their arsenal. The secrecy surrounding her construction was unprecedented.
Fearing American bombers would destroy the ship before she sailed, Japan took extraordinary measures. The dry dock was enclosed beneath a massive concrete roof. Workers were confined to the yard. Military police patrolled the perimeter. No photographs were allowed to leave. Even within the Navy, knowledge of Shinano was tightly controlled. Only a select few officers were permitted to know her specifications. That secrecy created problems. Suppliers didn't know what they were building for. Coordination suffered. Errors that normal oversight might catch went unnoticed. Shinano pushed the limits of naval engineering. Fully loaded, she displaced over 71,000 tons. Her armored flight deck could resist heavy bombs. Her armored belt at the waterline offered protection unknown in most carrier designs. Her hangar spaces were divided by heavy bulkheads intended to limit damage. Her engines were designed to drive her at high speed despite her massive bulk. Her defensive armament was formidable. Dual-purpose guns and dense anti-aircraft batteries intended to create overlapping fields of fire. In theory, she would be nearly impossible to kill. Yet she was being born into crisis. The workers building her were not the same elite craftsmen who built Yamato and Musashi. Many experienced shipbuilders had been drafted. Their replacements were conscripts, students, even prisoners. Quality control deteriorated. Welds that should have been inspected thoroughly were given quick glances. Systems that should have been tested under pressure were checked only on paper. The pressure to complete her was relentless. Tokyo demanded she be ready by November 1944. Work continued around the clock. Men collapsed from exhaustion. Accidents increased. Deaths were hushed up. The war effort was deemed more important than individual lives. Materials were compromised. Inferior substitutes replaced special steel.
Wiring and components became improvised. Redundancy disappeared. Single points of failure multiplied. The ship was held together by determination as much as engineering. Still, she took shape. Month by month, her hull rose. Her flight deck stretched toward completion. Her island superstructure grew from the starboard side. To those who saw her, even unfinished, she was awe-inspiring, a floating city, a monument to ambition. But ambition does not guarantee survival. Shinano's rush to completion would become her undoing. And waiting beyond the harbor in winter darkness was USS Archerfish, a standard submarine of no special distinction, commanded by a captain who had promised himself he would never hesitate again. Tonight, he intended to keep that promise, and somewhere ahead, the largest carrier in the world was sailing into his sights.